It's sad, really, that I know myself so damn well. Here it is, the day after Thanksgiving, and I got this thing in September. I got this thing almost 3 months ago. Why did I wait so long? Well, I found that if I open something new, and it's allowed to sit there for days, weeks, even months, those initial feelings and the thrill kind of mellow out. The other thing is that the new item that I've just opened can often be distracting from another unrelated item that I'm already working on. It's happened many times before, and it actually becomes something of killjoy. So for somebody who has high-functioning autism, and thus unusually high anxiety, this is a moment that has been tormenting me for the last 3 months. It's been sitting there on top of that pile of clean clothes on the floor, taunting me and tormenting me every time I went past it. I can see it when I'm laying in bed. It's driving me nuts. Well, you know what? Relief has come at last. Oh, that felt good. I have no idea why I'm doing this. Don't expect me to do this every time I open up a new item, of course. And I'll explain why in a little bit. This is such an awesome moment for me. No script, no rehearsal. I usually don't do the unboxing part, and I usually don't do it in front of camera. So the other tricky part is not showing you my face as I do this either. This is going to be awesome. The origins of Star Trek The Next Generation, often abbreviated as TNG, are mixed in many ways with the revival of the Star Trek franchise in 1979, with the debut of Star Trek The Motion Picture starring the original cast of the original series. The first 4 movies, while they did okay at the box office at the times they were released, the Star Trek franchise is more or less a niche market when you think about it. When you're trying to appeal to a broad audience, the movies can't really do that. There have been exceptions, of course. Star Trek IV was all about saving the whales, and the 2009 reboot was the most financially successful of any of the films. It made like double what they did in Star Trek IV, I think. Star Trek First Contact dealt with humanity before the era of Star Trek, but in our future. It's a little complicated, you have to watch it. But really, Star Trek is a niche market, and it didn't really make that much money. But Paramount Pictures knew that there is still potential there. They just had to find a way to execute it properly. At the very tippy end of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Captain Kirk and his famous senior officers are greeted by the sight of a brand new Enterprise sitting in space dock, with the registry number NCC-1701-D. Now, Star Trek IV came out in 1986, and what the public at large, including most Trekkers, did not realize then was that a brand new television series was in the works. Now, keep in mind, Star Trek The Motion Picture was created as a result of Paramount Pictures trying to create a second TV series based on TOS. It was going to be called Star Trek Phase 2, but that deals with the mechanics of how the first film came into being, and that's kind of irrelevant for the sake of this video review. But anyways, when Star Trek 4 came out, a lot of people were scratching their heads. Why would they call the registry number 1701-D? Well, the following year, Gene Roddenberry had a chance to share his vision with the rest of the world the right way. He actually got a second chance to do it. The films were a continuation, but you had to watch TOS to kind of get the background stories of all the characters and why this universe was so important and what all these interesting, fantastic things were. And thus Star Trek The Next Generation came into being. Taking place almost 90 years after the conclusion of Star Trek the original series, The Next Generation was basically given a clean slate with which to work with, while preserving the timeline that had been established 20 years earlier in another television series. New cast of lead characters, new types of action and drama, new stories, and, perhaps most importantly, the vessel that was going to take us there. Original series art director Matt Jeffries was not available at the time, but it was fortunate that the man who was mostly responsible for redesigning the Enterprise for the motion picture had already come up with a what-if concept sketch on his own. Later, he was hired by Paramount Pictures for the new series to design the new Enterprise, and it was purely by chance that he brought this sketch along with him, which was eventually presented to Gene Roddenberry, and he said, "That's it. Work with that." Thus, we got the U.S.S. Enterprise NCC-1701 Delta. Much like its four namesakes throughout Starfleet history, the Enterprise D is categorized as a long-range deep space exploration and research vessel, with additional emphasis on carrying cargo, colonists and other special passengers, ambassadorial roles, and, if necessary, warship, in order to defend the United Federation of Planets and its allies. However, despite the Galaxy-class's advanced weapons and deflector shields and hull integrity and structural integrity fields and warp speeds, it is, for the most part, a ship of peace, an ideal image of the principles and philosophies of the Federation. However, the Galaxy-class starships are not without controversy, for as big and powerful as they are, they also have a rather strong weakness to them, one which was exploited a number of times throughout the TV series. One of the reasons that they are so massive is because for the first time ever in Starfleet's history, crew members were allowed to have their immediate families stationed on board with them, which means you had hundreds of civilians, including little children, running about the ship. And you have to wonder, and this is kind of off-the-screen kind of things, why it is that Starfleet would have chosen to put civilian lives at risk when these ships are sent out to fight against the Cardassians, the Romulans, the Ferengi, and even the Borg. I mean, my God, there were like 4 or 5 episodes where they dealt with the Borg. Did the captains of these ships have to worry about the civilian population being carried around? These are more or less living cities, and while having those that you care about and that care about you close by and acting as one of your strengths, a point that was emphasized many times in the TV series, you still got to wonder if it was such a good idea. And yes, it made for a couple of nice episodes on the series, but why even bother introducing them? But I'm just getting picky about this. On with the review already, eh? When your television series budget is about 10 times what it was in the 1960s, you can afford to put a load more detail into your Starship design. There are detailed pictures on CollectionDX.com, of course, but I do have to do the wraparound for those who are too lazy to look at the pictures. Take the time to go to the CollectionDX.com site instead of looking at the whole thing on YouTube, but I digress. Here's the main bridge right here. You can see the tiny observation lounge windows blurred right there. A couple little techie details that I really like. One, this main strip here that goes right around here and on the bottom and a couple other places are the phaser banks they use. Rather than little turrets that pop out and just go pew 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 like that, you would see energy build up along the outsides, and when they converged it would shoot out a beam, as continuous or short as they'd like. Much more satisfying than the pew 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 that came from underneath. Main shuttle bay, which they never used in the show except once. These things, these are decals, not stamped on. Actually, I'm not sure. Yeah, those are decals. They're reflective. Just like the phaser ships, these are actually one of those details you don't know what they are, but they're still there. If I'm not much mistaken, those are actually transporter emitter arrays. Transporter beams would come out of those. Saucer impulse engine there. Shuttle bays 2 and 3. Actually, it could be 2 and 3. I don't remember. The main impulse engine right there. Aft torpedo launcher and additional phaser strips. and the somewhat controversial warp engine nacelles, which are very, very tiny. What the heck, I'll just put it up against the wall. See how tiny these warp nacelles are compared to the rest of it? That was a bit of a controversial thing they corrected when Star Trek First Contact came out. Oh yeah, I gotta show you the underneath here. Detail just goes on and on and on and on and on. Here's the never seen, never used, never mentioned captain's yacht. It's either the Calypso or I can't think what the other name was for it. I can't remember what that is. Oh yeah, the speaker for the sound effects sits right there. And by the way, even though officially it exists between my fingers right there, even though it's supposed to be there, I wholeheartedly believe, because of what you see on the sets, that the saucer navigational deflector array is actually where 10 forward sits. I fully believe that's where 10 forward is. I know it's supposed to be 10 forward, 10 degrees forward, whatever it is. But come on, it's right there. We get onto the neck of the ship, forward torpedo launcher, and the docking arm from when she's at a, let's see if I can recreate the angle. I think it's this. There's a docking arm which can lock on here when she's docked at space stations, star bases, things like that. Not star bases. Star bases are on the ground. The main navigational deflector array looks like a big old eye. In case you're not Trekkie enough to know what these white squares are all over the place, those are emergency escape pods. Hidden behind doors, of course. We'll detail they brought up, but never actually used. They said, oh, we have to eject the warp core. The little red colored thing right there, that's where the warp core would pop out. That little door just explodes off and the warp core gets jettisoned, which means in engineering is somewhere in there. But I digress. Bussard collectors, I hope I'm saying that name right. Which, by the way, Bussard collectors, that's an actual real-world thing. They haven't made them yet, but they certainly exist. Here's a sick little detail for you. Unless I'm much mistaken, that says Enterprise right there. I think those letters are as tall as a human, which makes this ship frickin' huge. And the one thing that will absolutely drop any Trekker to their knees is the amount of detail that you see here. 2 words. Aztec pattern. What do I mean by that? Let me switch videos here real quick and I will refocus. Give me a second here. You know what? I changed my mind. I gotta get this thing out of my hands. It's hard to stand at that angle anyways when I'm doing those wraparounds. Ugh, my knees. Ugh, my back. In 1978, as the special effects were being produced for Star Trek the Motion Picture, one of the ways that famed film director Robert Wise and the special effects team brought to the debut of the refit Enterprise was to add a new hull effect that was previously not possible in the 60s television series. One of the things you have to understand is that, like any other vessel in the modern day world, Starfleet vessels are not built in a single piece. They have to be assembled piece by piece by piece. And this can take years. Or in the case of a refit of a Constitution-class starship, 18 months. And one of the ways they did this was the introduction of panel lines which indicated that the ship had been built. For those extreme close-ups, and we got plenty of them early on in the motion picture, the film's model makers put an inordinate amount of surface detail into the ship. Not just lights or phaser banks or warp engine nacelle grills, but the hull plates that they had. In the special effects house, this was what is known as the Aztec pattern, and the name has since stuck. Ever since the concept was introduced in 1979, just about every single ship that appears on Star Trek has some kind of hull paneling. Of course, when you talk about the title ship, you have to have the Aztec pattern. Ladies and gentlemen, Diamond Select Toys version of the Enterprise D has the Aztec pattern intact. ZOMFG. I'm not going to do the wraparound again. If you go back and watch that wraparound that I just did, you will notice that there are actually 2 types of lines. There's the ingrain lines that have been molded into the surface, which represents the deflector shield grid, and then there's a layer that has been raised above the plastic, which represents the Aztec pattern. I know I'm saying that wrong. What is it? Every single surface here, with the exception of, light up areas, shuttle bays, and areas that have been stamped on, every single surface has the Aztec pattern. Across here, and here, even along the spine here. And just, you can take 10 minutes to look for all the detail along here, and it is screen accurate. And this is one of those, and I say screen accurate. You don't see the Aztec pattern very much, if at all, in the TV series, because they just couldn't get camera close enough. But rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at behind-the-scenes stuff, it is there on the filming models. There's an 8-foot model, there's a 4-foot model, and I think they made a 6-foot model. All three of those models have the Aztec pattern, and it is faithfully recreated here. I hate to repeat myself, but when you're talking about an Enterprise replica, and you say to a Trekker, Aztec pattern, they get all weak in the knees. Go ahead and try it. It's hilarious. Of course, if we're going to talk about Diamond Select Toys' Starship Legends line, we got to talk about the special effects. Oh, and by the way, I want to post this little note to Industrial Light and Magic, who did all the special effects work for Star Trek The Next Generation. It is really difficult to shoot the Enterprise from certain angles. It didn't occur to me until I started shooting the photos and even this video of how awkward it is to shoot the Enterprise at heroic angles. It looks great. It's a great ship in person. It's just really difficult to do it on a, 4 by 3.5 video screen. So now I understand your pain. It's just from some angles, it's just kind of awkward. But anyways, on with the light and sound. I'm just going to kill two birds with one stone here. Rather than press the button, let it make the sound effect, and wait for it to stop wiggling before I press it again, I'm just going to hold it in my hands and do the wraparound at the same time. And I'm also just going to show you the, sound effects demo mode.
This is Captain Jean-Luc. Energize. Scan for life forms. Shields up, red alert. Make it so. Deep gray hot. Special pattern, Sierra, and fire. Transferring command to the battle bridge. Continue fire all phases. Damage report. Warp 9. Engage. Let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.
You'll notice throughout the whole thing, the saucer impulse engines do not light up at all, but the main impulse engine does. And that's all the sound effects that you hear. Nice. With all that red and blue flashing on and off like that, the Enterprise D looks a lot like the Mutara Nebula. Fortunately, Diamond Select Toys incorporated a display mode. You push this tiny ass button down here, which is actually not easy to press. You gotta use my fingernail on that. But you can put it into a static display mode where the lights will always stay on. Now note, the saucer impulse engines, now they're turned on, but when you just press the button and it's not in display mode, they will stay off. It preserves the batteries in the saucer section. There's the bridge. It's lit up. It's not that strong. It's kind of like the TOS Enterprise that Diamond Select Toys made. The bridge dome lights up incredibly bright. But the details on here, there's 3 LEDs in each warp nacelle. Well, 4. It's actually a single LED in the Bussard collector, and I can't get any closer than that. But anyways. Yeah, the paint got scratched off there. That's probably due to manufacturing error. Oh well, I can live with that. And if I'm not much mistaken, these are actually supposed to be yellow. Like the main impulse engine was red, but the saucer-mounted ones were supposed to be yellow. Anyways. It's odd, the light only leaks out through the bridge dome, but everywhere else works out just fine. There are 2 LEDs in the navigational deflector. Makes it look a little strange because you don't see much of the gold go in there. It certainly does highlight it quite nicely. Look how big that saucer is. It takes up the whole screen. Nice. Oh, and also, when it's in display mode, you can still use the audio sound effects. Okay, a random sound effect right there. But you'll notice, not only do the warp nacelles not blink on and off, the main bridge, that always blinks in tandem with the sound effects. But you'll notice the impulse engines, the saucer impulse engines, turn themselves off automatically. Oh, big ship, hard to reach. See, they just, the impulse engines turn on and off automatically. Even for when the ship is going to warp, which is kind of weird, but okay. So that is the light and sound effects for the Enterprise D. A lot of people think that this idea debuted in Star Trek The Next Generation. I think it may actually have made its first appearance, at least the idea of this would have made its first appearance in Mr. Scott's Guide to the Enterprise, which was a book released in the early 70s when Star Trek was well on its way to becoming a cult classic. At least I think it was in that book. I'm not sure. Anyways, this is the HD edition that Diamond Select Toys put out. It's not on here. Okay, you're not going to see it, but I just want to show you where it might have been. I think it's on the 8-foot filming model from the 60s. But anyways, the space directly where the base of the neck and the saucer, there would have been lines and warning markers and things like that. And what that was for, warp drive was not well defined in the 1960s. Believe it or not, in 2009, 2010, yeah, this is still true. But matter antimatter warp reactors are dangerous, and they can actually blow up. And so the idea was that when the Enterprise was damaged enough, they could evacuate all the personnel from the engineering section, put them into the saucer section, and then the whole saucer section would just pop off, and like the giant flying saucer it would just float away while the back half explodes. That was actually proposed for Star Trek the Original Series, but they barely had enough money to make what they did make. So obviously we never saw that until 1987. Believe it or not, the refit Enterprise from Star Trek the Motion Picture was also designed to incorporate an emergency saucer separation. Well, obviously we never got to see this again. But regardless, they sat on the idea. Now you remember when I did the wraparound, I mentioned that this little hatch right here is where the warp reactor core can be ejected, and then the Enterprise can boost away from it. Well, that kind of negates the purpose of an emergency separation. Now keep in mind, Galaxy-class starships, such as the Enterprise D, were designed to carry civilian populations. Controversial as that is, I will not get into it here. But they still needed a way to be able to get their civilian populations away from danger zones just in case. Or, as happened once in a while, the emergency ejection system didn't work. So what you did is you would evacuate all personnel from the same basic idea. You'd evacuate everybody from the engineering hull into the saucer section, and then through very graceful cinematography, which I cannot repeat here, you would carefully separate the saucer.
Emergency saucer separate.
Now, that's what it's supposed to sound like. You know what? Now, the thing is, that's what it's supposed to sound like. Here's my problem, though, and I'm getting off topic for a moment here. The saucer section is a little power hog. It's got 3 LR-44s sitting in here, and I had fresh, brand new 3 of them sitting in there for 3 days. 1, 2, 3. See, 3 days. I had it sitting in there for 3 days, and after that, it just dried up, gone, done. Now, when it's still connected, this derives its power from this. You can see the battery compartment here contains 3 AAA batteries. But this thing is a little power hog. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate it here because I'm too lazy. It's been like 3-4 days since the power on this got lost. But what I did there is I tricked it. I kept the, let's see this line of stubs right here? I kept these connected to the line of stubs on the nose there, and then I was able to trick it into thinking it could do the separation sound. So even though that sound effect actually does happen when the saucer separates,
Emergency saucer separate.
unfortunately mine cannot do it because the batteries are dead. Otherwise, you can separate this in slow motion style, and this will continue to make its own sound effects. This does not have any speaker built into it. This carries the majority of the power, literally. Like, this powers saucer section. But, yeah, anyway, so, yeah, this thing's a little power hog. What you can do, and I actually have the listing on CollectionDX.com of which sound effects do and do not play. Like, it will not make the warping sound effects. It will not tell you to, warp 9, engage. It will not say some of those things automatically. But you can still, press the bridge, and oh my god, this thing makes its own sounds. Oh yeah, by the way, here's the saucer section. So, here's the saucer section, and it is literally a giant flying saucer, albeit a giant oval, but nonetheless. And here's the detail, and it does say Enterprise NCC-1701-D right there, which is nice. This little ring right here is actually the phaser strip from the engineering section, or from the battle section. It's actually rubbing off right there. So, anyways, these are not emergency escape pods. These are instead the holes for the docking latches. Now, obviously, they're just printed on there, just painted on. But there it is. And a little space for the battle bridge section right there. It's kind of disappointing though, the lack of detail in here. It's just these printed on sections, and that is it. But, hey, at least they did something, It's actually rather nice. And again, looks just like it does in the TV series. And the movie to some degree. So there's the saucer section. And then the back half has a couple of different names for it. It's the star drive section, it's the battle section, it's the engineering hull. There's a couple different names for this. But, I've already done the wraparound here. But top here again, Enterprise 1701-D. Here's the phaser strip I was talking about. You can see it's starting to rub off a little bit right there. Contact points for the electronics, battle bridge right there. No lights in the battle bridge. More escape pods. Now, while the latches are represented here, as well as a little bit of the Aztec pattern, the latches actually, the latches are represented, but they're not painted for whatever reason. So anyways, yeah. Rather duck-billed look, if you ask me. So that is the detail on the battle section. Now obviously the 20 or so docking latches on the top of the battle section do not extend or retract, and there's certainly no holes in the bottom here. However, there are 3 little tabs right here which fit into 3 little holes right here. So how does this keep together? Well, these holes, they don't grip anything. However, as you saw me demonstrate a moment ago, not intentionally of course, you can line it up just so, and then, believe it or not, there's no latching system. It's actually a magnet. The whole system is, I think it's a collection of magnets that sits in both halves. Yeah, it would be in both halves. Anyways, yeah. Now here's the interesting thing. You can separate it, as I showed you earlier. You can, let's see if I can do this again. Nope. Okay, I gotta do it from this side.
Emergency saucer separate.
And then I'll trick it by making it think it's going back together. Okay, now here's the interesting part. Unfortunately, I can't quite demonstrate this for you the way I would like to because the batteries like I said, the saucer section is a little power hog, but you can separate this while it's in display mode. I'm going to trick it again. And then the lights will actually stay on. Now, unfortunately, because mine... Ooh, I got to be careful here. No! Because mine... Now you'll see... bad grip. See the lights still working on this. However, the batteries, not batteries, are drained on this. And unfortunately, that doesn't work either. Now, it's actually scared me the first few times I put this together. And the thing that worries me is that the tabs here and here, this is a powerful magnet in here. I mean, I'm not surprised that I'm surprised that it hasn't scrambled the electronics in here. Actually, that's probably what drains the batteries. Anyways, you just have to kind of line it up and smack together. And that's literally all you can do. But what worries me is when you separate it. Let's see, are they? Nope. What worries me is that the little tabs on the bottom of that are going to start scratching up the paint. That's one thing I've forgotten to mention here. I might as well bring it up while I'm here. Every single surface you see on this thing, with the exception of glowing parts and the phaser strips and the transporters and the lettering, every single surface is painted. I'm not kidding. The original plastic, like you take the plastic cover off, the plastic is actually kind of a tan white color or whatever it is. Everything you see here is painted. This thing is awesome. I haven't talked about it up to this point, but it has been a crucial part of this video, and that is the display stand. Now, the Enterprise D is very, very front heavy. Even though the mounting point for the display stand is here, center of gravity, I suppose, would be more like here. That's probably where it is, because if it's I'm putting my finger at the base of the neck, it leans back. So it's actually somewhere in here. But obviously, unless you mounted it from the side or above, that's the best you can do, okay? Ooh. The display stand has a ball and socket joint at the top, so you can twist the Enterprise in a lot of different positions, and it'll actually hold it. Unlike the display stand for the TOS Enterprise, whichever version you get, which had a really crappy ball joint on the top. I mean, it's same basic design, or same basic function, it's just this was crappy. The other difference between the Enterprise D and the TOS is, well, the size is about the same, but the logo is different. This is TOS logo, and this is, let me get my hand out of the way, the Next Generation logo. Which, I kind of like this one better. Also note, it's not in perfect symmetry. This point of the arrowhead is actually a little longer, and it actually curves to off-center. Anyways, yeah, this is the display stand. Now, what if you want to display your Enterprise D separated? Well, they've got an answer for that. That's cool, because you actually have one display stand stuck inside the other, like I shall do right now. Pops into this right here. And because the center of gravity has shifted significantly, there is a second hole right here. You can plug the smaller... Yeah, I didn't give you a good view of that. There you go. And oh yeah, by the way, the smaller one is also on a ball and socket joint. And you don't have to worry about balancing either one of these, although this does separate, well, it does separate rather easily. But, there it is. Little bit of trivia, the Next Generation episode Cause and Effect, I think it was 4th or 5th season, was supposed to feature a Constitution-class starship colliding with the Enterprise D. Watch the episode to find out why. They ended up modifying the model of the U.S.S. Reliant from Star Trek II, and they called it the Soyuz class. But the plan had been for a Constitution refit Starship to come into the series, thus making it official that one is derived from the other. But unfortunately, budgetary constraints didn't allow it, and I'm getting off topic. Anyways, if that had happened in that series, you would have seen how big a ship like the Enterprise A, the Enterprise refit, would have been compared to a Galaxy-class starship. Anyways, putting a Constitution on screen with a Galaxy would have been nice, because you would have seen that the Enterprise refit was no bigger than this. And this is very well documented. This is canon, this is fact. This is how big the Enterprise would have been. TOS, refit, Enterprise A. This is it. Which means that Diamond Select Toys Electronic Enterprise TOS is off scale by about 2 inches. Like this is 14 inches, and this is 16 inches. Diamond Select Toys, could you do us a favor and release a couple of non-electronic, well-detailed, well-painted, smaller versions so we can, like put them all in a row or something like that? Like your Enterprise E from Star Trek First Contact is about the same size. Actually, physically it's 16. They're both 16 inches, but the E is actually slightly longer. You can put those in scale from the Diamond Select Toys versions, but the predecessors, the refit, TOS, A, B, and C, we don't have anything like that. So, please do that. Pretty please. However, controversy abounds amongst Trekkies when the 2009 reboot came out, establishing that the new version of the Enterprise was actually about this size. Ladies and gentlemen, intentional or not, this is actually in scale. Whether Playmate Toys or Diamond Select Toys did this intentionally, I don't know, but this is pretty much the estimate size. Like, you could put TOS Enterprise would be only that big. Something like that. That's in scale. Wow. I don't know how it is this keeps finding its way into all my Star Trek reviews, even though I've already reviewed it. By the way, this is a crap toy. Diamond Select Toys, get the contract for this one too, and do something about that, please. So, yeah, I thought I'd just mention that real quick. Barring the typical long interruptions that happen between sentences or even phrases that happen when I do a video, I shot a 20-minute commentary, which, by the way, actually isn't uncommon for me. But it was mostly about nostalgia and how much I love TNG, and how just as the Enterprise D herself is the flagship of Starfleet, TNG is the flagship of the franchise, even though TOS is a little more pop culture oriented, and how Star Trek never has really recaptured the pop culture status it had during TNG's run. It's the most popular of all the TV series that have been made. I did this whole spiel, but I decided that maybe I should cut this down a little bit, considering how long the video has run thus far. I suppose to keep this as short as I can, I should be a little old school and say what I liked about it, what I disliked about it. What do I like about it? Well, frickin' everything. This thing is beautiful. I've been using that word too much too lately, but when it comes to the Enterprise D, it's absolutely true. I mean, think what you like of it. A lot of people like it, a lot of people dislike it. The special effects guys dislike it because it was so difficult to photograph. Can't say I blame them anymore. A lot of people, including myself, complained about how small the warp nacelles were. Why would you have a civilian population on board? Blah, blah, blah. A lot of trivial stuff. But when you just cut through all that and just look at it as is, kind of sort of out of context, it's amazing. The level of detail on this is breathtaking. And you know what? 15 years after the series concluded, and she was sadly destroyed at the end of Star Trek Generations, where they successfully executed an emergency saucer landing, just as it appeared in Star Trek The Next Generation, the technical manual, which I do have, but is so buried I cannot get to. I'm not even going to try to get to it. But this is easily one of the highlights and center points of any Trekkie's collection. The only things I would complain about is that the friction in the ball and socket joint in the main display stand got loose a little fast. Not as badly as it did with the TOS Enterprise display stand, which was god-awful. but, you know, the friction is still a little bit of an issue. Something else I complained about, the batteries in the saucer section drain themselves really fast. I was really surprised that they didn't try to use AAA batteries or something like that. There are 3 AAAs in this engineering section. They should not have used watch batteries in the saucer. Considering all the sound effects that it has to put out, and that it needs to be functional when it's separated in display mode, it needed a bit more juice. And this just doesn't have it. And there's one other thing that a lot of Trekkies have noted, and it is kind of a major thing, is that the neck is not detailed properly. You know, there's all kinds of windows and escape pods and all kinds of things like that. Well, just like the inner surface between the saucer and the battle bridge sections there, it's all flat, and then it just has, printed details on there. But you don't see any windows, you don't see any sensors, you don't see anything along here. While these darkened lines, you can look at the pictures on CDX, my review there, while these lines do exist on the filming model of the Enterprise D, they do not stick out like this. You should be seeing windows and sensors and all kinds of things sticking in there. While it is nice, yeah, they put... What's there is detailed and is nice, but it doesn't match the level of detail that everything else has compared to its on-screen counterpart. So that's kind of a major sticking point. Now, I have heard that fan-created decals do exist out there. I don't know where, I don't know how much, and I don't know how to get them. All I know is that they exist out there. So if you guys want to go out, you get one of these, and then you get one of those decal sets. I hear they're good replacement. So anyways, friction on ball and socket joint. Oh yeah, the smaller display stand pops out of there very easily. Lack of detailing along the front half of the neck. Low battery output on the saucer section. Oh yeah, and how frickin' bright the LED on the bridge dome is. It's not supposed to shine that brightly. And it's certainly not supposed to soak through the plastic, even if it's painted. Like, it doesn't soak through anywhere else except on the impulse engines, which, okay, that's kind of inevitable. Oh, I got the hiccups. But this is ridiculous up here. Oh, by the way, just in case you've been living under a rock since 2008, when this came out, Diamond Select Toys did release the modified version of the Enterprise D that showed up in the series finale episode All Good Things. And I debated getting that, but I decided not to. But it's interesting to note the All Good Things Enterprise actually does have the additional details along the neck. Even though some of them are covered up by new panels, it's ridiculous. But hey, at least they corrected it. I have not done a comparison between the AGT Enterprise and this one, so please don't ask me, because I don't know. But just simply know that it's out there. You know, call me a Trekkie if you must, but I'd actually like to see Diamond Select Toys release a version of the Enterprise D that has the original Andy Probert coloring. Like, the hull was originally supposed to be some kind of a muted turquoise. The warp nacelle grills and the deflector dish were supposed to be gold. You know, something like that. I remember, and I'm going to get into nostalgia here for a moment, when Star Trek The Next Generation first came out in '87, I got the 6-inch die-cast Enterprise. You know, you had to play around with those die-cast metal hooks in the saucer section. Well, like many others, mine broke, and so you guys had to hold it at a weird angle or something like that. Thank God for magnets, by the way. So, you know, I actually had a TNG Enterprise that was about this long. Actually, it might have been, I don't know. I think I still have it in the walk-in closet. I'm not sure anymore. I'm pretty sure I didn't get rid of it. And, you know, when Star Trek 4 came out, I had a little, 3.5-inch vinyl die-cast Enterprise A, whatever it was. But, the warp nacelles kept popping off. So, yeah, I did have a representation of this before, and at the time I would have, still do to some degree, would like to get one of Playmate Toys' Enterprise D, because believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Playmate Toys version and this, the exact same size. And that's actually something that I haven't brought up yet. The size of this replica, it's perfect. It's perfect size. It's not so big that you have to have a second hand in order to hold it, but it's not so small that they had to exclude some of the detailing like the Aztec pattern. My jaw hit the floor. I bought this and didn't realize the Aztec pattern was on there. Holy. But it's just the right size, and it's the size of, the Playmate Toys version. So it just fits nicely in your hand. It's big for kids. It's big for collectors. Oh yeah, by the way, this is not a toy. Do not give this to kids. Like, this is ideal for collectors, but the Playmates version is definitely ideal for kids. I kind of wish we had, the Playmates version here where it had, a couple of buttons along the spine, and you could choose which sound effect would play. Like this one, it's got 17 sound effects in it, which is brilliant, but you can't choose which one comes next. So a little variation would be nice. So, multiple buttons is a possibility. And now I shall apologize profusely for dragging out this conclusion way longer than I had originally planned. Not that I ever really plan how long these are going to run. And I shall grace you, at least once, with the awesome theme song composed by legendary film scorer Jerry Goldsmith. Jerry, 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 Jerry. This is AV Unit 4A for CollectionDX.com, signing off.